Work Inc. was in Quincy. It's part of the reason I'm here. I'm very good friends with Jim. I've served in the Work Inc. board since 1998. So I'm very, very familiar with the programs up here. And, not going into my long history, but I've been involved in not-for-profits in one form or another in the Quincy area. So QCAP's board for a number of years. I founded a not-for-profit agency in the middle of recession, first of its kind, very unique model for Quincy Aging Resources. Some of you probably haven't heard. We don't come to my city enough. But finding a not-for-profit, building one in the middle of recession is very, very challenging. Believe me. And I actually go back to cerebral palsy of the South Shore, which is now Massachusetts cerebral palsy. I want to volunteer there for 3 months as part of my volunteer program at BC High. I work with kids with cerebral palsy and spina bifida and MS, and I'm extraordinarily sympathetic and understanding of the disability community as well as people with needs. So, with that said, I think there's some things lost in the message in the world about not-for-profit agencies, because I'm a huge not-for-profit advocate, because the jobs, the local economic stimulus, as has been pointed out, you don't go anywhere. The human services is here. You don't outsource it. But it's really hard times right now, because I'm just old enough to remember that health insurance was cheaper, and not-for-profits offered very generous health insurance benefits in exchange for poor salaries. They offered very good vacation benefits in exchange for very poor salaries. Those days are gone, and very tough. And nothing's worse than sitting on a board like Work Inc. and discussing layoffs, and discussing cuts, and discussing how we're going to keep employee retention. And this applies for both when the economy is really good and really bad. And people like Melanie has to do 2 jobs, and I've heard stories from when Jim will do 3 jobs. 70 hours a week just to make ends meet at home. And as the costs rise and the salaries don't, they got to make ends meet in other ways. And I did 3 jobs in college. I have debt till I die. I'm confident of that. But it is really, really hard out there. And I think that's part of the message in the not-for-profit community that has to really, really get out. I employ 15 people. They live in your community. If I go under, they go out in the streets. Where are they going to go? Unemployment's 8.2%. Where are you going to send them? And I'm going to tell you right now, people are going to look at you like, well, they can get a job. I love that story from people when I go on the streets. Oh yeah, anybody can get a job. There's plenty of jobs out there. They're just too lazy to get it. I'm like looking at them like, are you kidding me? Freaking, KFC on the corner of my street has not had a looking for employees sign in 3 years. No. They're not teenagers working these places anymore. They're middle-aged people who are trying to make ends meet. They'll take an older person over the younger person because they're generally more responsible. That's people got this disconnect out there that I noticed, but no one else is. And the not-for-profit board is a variable economic engine that, not to beat up on the administration, but I don't think they quite fully grasp it, on the larger scheme. They're talking about, green energy. They want to build, solar plants that go to China. You shouldn't pick on the Chinese, bad for me. But, just saying. But, and I was around, I remember, I won't say I was around, I've been around long enough. When Fidelity got their cut, when Fidelity left the state, I remember Fidelity got their tax break. I remember the first thing they did was move to Rhode Island. We moved the headquarters from Boston to Rhode Island. People forget that too. I'm just old enough to remember a few things. So, and no one wants to talk about that in the media. Why is that? Meantime, not-for-profits are struggling to raise money. I mean, let's think about this. It's government cutbacks, economy's bad and regular folks, you can't be as generous. Financial industry melts down. A lot of your major banks are required in the state to provide community service donations. They can't do as much as they used to because of the fallout of the financial markets, which they did it themselves with the insurance industry. Okay, that stuff. And then, of course, you got campaigns running across every single year, gobbling dollars, and I'm guilty of that as well as if you're, some of my colleagues of, taking money away from you because I need to run my campaign. And of course, sadly enough, not-for-profits are competing against not-for-profits in a smaller pool of money. And that's the part that I find most disheartening. Because, I hate to bid Father Bill's Shelter in Quincy against the food pantry in Germantown, against, field assistance and housing assistance and English second language programs at Quincy Aging Resources and Work Inc. And social housing, building single housing units. And doing mortgage foreclosures. I hate finding ourselves in this very competitive situation that unfortunately you guys are in, squeezing every dollar you can sadly, from people who are trying to give as much as they can. So, all I can say is that, I did say, I did go to Ways and Means and say this was, number 2 after local aid, is the disability community in particular. It's a huge priority of mine because, I've not heard anything from the administration that sounds like an answer. Not even a Band-Aid. This is 8 years of this now, and I can't stand this anymore. And generally, people are smart.
You started though.
Well, I've been around a little while. A little while. But I mean, generally what happens, what I hear from people is that, well, we're gonna cut this, and we're gonna do this as a Band-Aid to address those consumers that we can't provide service to till we get to the next budget and see where we are, reevaluate again. There's none of that going on. This is just straight up cutting. And they presume because we privatize, I hate to use the word privatize, but that's what we have, privatized a lot of human services, that you guys can, figure it on your own. Well, as a member of Workings Board and QCAP Board and Quincy Research Board that I've sat on, I still sit on Workings Board, we kind of look at our numbers and go, well, how? We've got restricted government funding. That's tough. And when you sit on a citizen board like Quincy Resources, who are just common folk, they're not administrators, not-for-profit people, when we explain restricted government funding, they all looked at us like, well, what does that mean? That means 2% goes to overhead. Everything else will go to program. So we got to find other ways to keep the lights on. So we run big, we run our little fundraisers. And my chant to people, where's this money going? Rent. Look at it. Well, what do you think? We're a charity. We're a small business, essentially. The not-for-profit, the no-tax status is not helping enough. So that's what no tax is supposed to be. The not-for-profit status, no tax status will help you on some of these overhead costs. It isn't helping anymore. So as a result, we have to get innovative about how we go about doing business, adopt some private business models, but not lose sense of our mission, and not go all the way, to the private sector and concept of, shareholder benefits. We have to cut out employees to make sure we get our dividends. We don't have that issue. But at the same time, though, we do have, I've noticed in not-for-profits at my local level, and some are working as well. We have to adopt a few private sector models and try to keep services going for people who need it the most, because there's nowhere else to go. And not willing to go back 45 years to what we used to do with institutionalization and abandonment and, throwing them in the corner of a city so no one can see them. I'm not ready to go there yet. Because my city, I kind of know what it feels like to be put in the corner. So I'm not going there. So, once again, you guys really do God's work, as Angelo said. I mean, without a doubt. And I'm an atheist, so it's even better. And, that's all I can really say. So